Butty and a Buddy podcast. I'm Dominic.
And I'm Erica.
We've been gone for a while, haven't we?
We have,
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
But we're back. Just in time for Christmas, too. And today we're going to be talking about the Get Back documentary that we've all been watching, I hope.
Yeah. I hope you guys are interested because this is going to be a two-parter.
It's the Beatles Get Back documentary, so yeah, it's going to be a two-parter, maybe a three.
Yeah.
We'll see. Peter Jackson.
We'll try to.
Peter Jackson has final say on that, so.
Oh my god, yeah, imagine Peter Jackson edited these podcasts.
Well, he'd make a better job of it than me, I can tell you that now. And what a job he did on Get Back. I mean, this has been the culmination of, every Beatles fan's dream.
Oh, yeah.
Because of all this footage that's been locked away in a vault for, 50 years. Because we've, the original Let It Be movie was released, but then it was, quickly taken out of circulation because it was very grim and...
Yeah, I think, let's just back up for half a second.
We're backing up.
In case you guys don't know, Dominic and I are massive, massive Beatles fans. In fact, that is how we met. I don't know that we've ever really gone into our Beatles, obsession in this podcast.
We used to have a podcast called The Beatles Through the Years.
Yeah. It was called Tina Buddy because The Beatles Through the Years was, each of those letters kind of look like T Buddy.
TBTTY, yeah. So that's where we got our start.
Yeah.
And we had people on, we interviewed people and all that, we played Beatles music and we talked about the Beatles. And so we're kind of just merging that with this one, which is a general interest.
Yeah.
British and American.
Yeah, this podcast kind of just became about everything that we're into.
Everything that we're into.
Daily conversations we have.
Daily conversations.
Daily arguments we have.
Daily arguments we have. Kind of like the Get Back documentary, actually.
But yeah, so we're super, super Beatles fans. If you guys are interested, maybe we'll do a podcast, just a general Beatles podcast at some point.
I think we might have done one before, but no.
I don't think we have somehow. Not on this, not in this new format.
This new format, this new ritzy glitzy format that we've got.
Well, we've been doing this now for 2 years.
2 years, I think. The end of 2018.
We're gonna start our third year. I think we're starting our third year now.
Yeah,
because we started at the end.
2018, and this is 2021.
2021, yeah.
It feels it still feels like 2020.
We're starting
because of the pandemic.
We're starting our third year, yeah. So, anyway, we're big Beatles fans.
Yeah,
and we were both born way after the Beatles were
way after. 20 years.
Well, after they were already finished.
Yeah. 20 years after they stopped touring, anyway.
So pretty much, not totally, but pretty much all of their stuff had already been put out and was released, and all the bootlegs were already out there. So by the time Dominic and I got into the Beatles, we had everything already sort of at our fingertips.
Yes.
There were things
the
One album.
Well, that came out when I was 14.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But those were things that came out during our lifetime.
Yeah.
So there were
the anthology came out.
And the anthology. Yeah. And then the Love album, I guess, if you want to say that. And just a few other little things. But this was a major thing that they had never ever released on DVD. You could only get a hold of this as a bootleg. Unless you saw it.
And you could only get hold of the footage as a bootleg too sometimes. The extended bits.
Unless you saw it, unless you were old enough to have seen it when it originally came out.
Which was 1970.
And I don't even know, even then, was it released worldwide? In
I think
all
it had
theaters
I think it had a limited release.
Yeah, so...
And then they just kind of
So maybe even
None of the Beatles attended the premiere of it anyway, because it was split up by then,
So maybe even if you were a Beatles fan back then, you maybe never even saw it, You could see clips of it more recently on YouTube. And,
yeah.
And if you knew where to go, you could download it. You could buy it illegally on eBay or something like that, which is what I did years ago.
No, I just now deleted, because I had some of the old black and white footage from the Get Back Winter of Discontent.
Oh, yeah?
Which was, I had like, it was on 20 parts on YouTube, and I managed to get it all off YouTube before they took it down.
Footage?
It was footage, yeah. It was the same footage, but it was all grainy black and white.
You never show this to me. Oh.
Yeah, you've seen it.
Maybe, yeah.
And I mean, but now, I don't need it anymore, because Peter Jackson has put it all into this 3-part documentary that aired on Disney+.
Yeah, so if you guys are Beatles fans and you have seen the original Let It Be documentary, or even if you're not massive Beatles fans, you maybe still have seen, clips of it here and there and stuff, or you've heard enough about it that it was quite a depressing documentary, the way it was all put together. And presented. The original Let It Be.
The original Let It Be movie. It was directed by Michael Lindsay Hogg. And what he originally did, and thank goodness he did, was he was trying to make a candid documentary about them.
Yeah.
And he fought against the band to do that, He was always putting microphones here and trying to capture them as candidly as he could.
Yeah. Because he said, they acted really different once they knew the
As soon as the camera was on, it was, who's that little old man? He's clean, isn't he? They went back into
Beatle mode.
Into Beatle mode, yeah. So it was just kind of like, they're playing up. I want this to be kind of candid. I want them to really talk and stuff. Yeah. And sometimes they'd be like, and most of the footage was unusable because they were like having conversations or something and they had the camera on them, but George was playing his guitar really loudly, so you couldn't really hear what they were saying.
Do you think they were doing that on purpose?
Yeah, they were. They were
purposefully trying to cover up their conversations.
Yeah, I mean, George didn't like the whole process anyway.
Yeah, no.
And John and Paul didn't either, because, as we know from the original Let It Be movie, there was some tension. And, historically, there was some tension, because they just finished doing the White Album a couple of months earlier. This was all in January 1969.
Yeah.
And so there had been tensions during that. Ringo had walked out of those sessions.
Yeah.
And come back. And they just weren't all getting on.
Yeah.
And then when they had a little holiday from each other, then they came back for this project, which was
Another one of Paul's
projects, which, again, they were kind of getting cheesed off with him directing the band since Brian had died.
Yeah.
But he didn't, and, this, and everybody
was Sgt.
like,
Pepper was his concept. They weren't super into that either, I don't think.
They weren't, but
as far as wearing costumes and stuff.
Yeah.
Magical Mystery Tour
was his thing.
Didn't they have, they had a certain number of films they had to do, though? They were under contract
They were under contract to United Artists, and I think they owed them one more film, which I think...
This was?
No. I think they intended Magical Mystery Tour to be the film, but then it just was like, oh no, we'll just stick it on at TV. It was their TV special,
Yeah.
So Yellow Submarine...
Oh, that ended up being the
final one.
I always thought...
and how they got in, because it was just going to be an animated feature. And I remember George in the anthology, George Harrison, saying, I don't know why we didn't do our own voices for it now. I don't know, that never came up to do it, I guess.
Yeah.
But we were there at the end of the film. So that was our appearance covered. That was our film, it's like, we've done a film, and that's it, But I guess there was maybe one more film they wanted. Maybe there was a,
Oh, I always thought some reason that Let It Be was part of that contractual obligation that they had.
Maybe. But it was going to be a live TV special with 14 songs, and it showed them rehearsing and getting these songs together to do a live TV special.
Yeah. At the end.
Yeah. And, it didn't... George was very vehemently opposed to having an audience and doing stuff live.
Yeah.
And, John was kind of like, yeah, I'll get on stage, yeah, I'll do it again, yeah, okay, but he wasn't really that interested.
Yeah.
Paul was, trying to pull them all together. And, of course, what this shows now, this new footage and everything that's been put together in a story by Peter Jackson, cleaned up, restored. You know, they talk about the process of like how they managed to separate the audio.
Oh yeah.
They had like a machine that like learned what a guitar was, learned what the drums were, so they could separate it onto a track, you know, so they could mix it better. And, you know, they called it Mal, after Mal Evans.
Oh,
who was,
yeah.
You know, because like Hal, and it was just like, he managed to do that, so he managed to separate the background noise so we could actually hear what they were saying. And, you know, that became, you know, that just helped enormously.
Yeah, because Beatles fans have always known that all of this, aside from the Let It Be film being a bootleg in itself because it was never officially released, Beatles fans always knew that all this extra footage existed.
There was 60 hours of it.
And you could get a hold of it.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know if I knew about the video footage. Maybe I did.
There was 60 hours of video footage and about 150 hours of audio. Because
and neither one were great quality.
Neither one were great quality.
I always assumed, though, that the bad quality of it was just the fact that it was bootleg.
Well, it was bootleg, but it was shot in 16mm stock, which wasn't film stock.
That shouldn't matter on a computer, I wouldn't think.
Well,
you know, because you're watching this stuff on the computer, you know. Thanks
to upgrades in technology and advances and stuff, you know, they could now digitally scan all that footage and clean it up and denoise it and make it look better, which is what he did, you know.
Yeah.
And he could blow it up without it making it look too bad, you know.
So the original Let It Be film was pretty...
It was grainy, it was dark.
It was grim, I thought you were going to say.
It was grim. It was grim. It didn't tell a story, it was just kind of showing them rehearsing in...
It was just like a bunch of clips, like, band-aided together.
Yeah.
And that was because the band members kept going in there and going, "Oh no, don't leave that in."
Hogg had to deal with the fallout of them going in. You know, John would come in and go, "Take that bit out there. Don't like that bit because of Yoko and because of Paul and and Paul would come in and don't like that bit. Take that out." And it was just like what he ended up with was just like a barely suitable package. And there was a proviso of him not showing George walking out of the sessions.
Which to be fair, the footage doesn't exist of that.
It does, but for some reason it's not there, and it's only the audio of it. There's only the audio. So he had to Peter Jackson had to kind of composite scenes together, which made it look because that's what he's kind of done. With all the audio, there's so much audio. He's composited footage which kind of like goes with that on that day.
I thought it was really interesting. Well, I feel like we're getting ahead of ourselves. We should probably try to organize
this is
part
one part one on the Twickenham sessions.
But anyway, to get back to the original, it was grim. It's sad. It's like you're watching...
And you don't know what you're watching half the time.
You don't.
Because I remember there was like, and then there was like this like, and then they suddenly moved to the Apple studio from Twickenham. It was like, they were just talking.
And there's no explanation.
There's no explanation why. It was just like a transition, and then they went there and...
Yeah, there's no like narration on the original film as to like Dominic said, you don't really know what you're watching. I mean, if you're a fan, you've seen the anthology, you've read plenty of books, so you do know what you're watching. But I can imagine at the time you were just like, what is going on? What are they doing now? There's no sort of narration like explaining what the guys are doing. You don't even know.
What they're doing.
Yeah, it's just literally you're watching them practice and stuff, and you don't know why, really.
And you're kind of like, okay, what's this for then? And as we know, it culminated in the rooftop concert.
Yeah.
And that's what he kind of tried to make it out, like, they're just rehearsing for this.
Yeah.
And it's like, that wasn't.
No, and I always thought that was like, obviously I didn't think that was what they were going to do, because even in the original Let It Be, you hear them arguing about well, what are we going to do? Are we going to go on the roof? Are we going to go over here? Are we going to go over there? Yeah. No, I don't want to go anywhere, blah, blah, blah,
In the first part of the Twickenham, in the first part of Get Back, it becomes very clear of what's going on.
But I always thought that the rooftop concert was a concert. Like, in the Let It Be film, they kind of make it seem like it's
They cut it down to 20 minutes.
And they make it seem like, oh, this is a concert. Like, I didn't realize, oh, no, they did each of those songs several times.
It was a dress rehearsal for an actual concert that never happened.
Yeah.
And it's like
which kind of is even sadder in a way.
It's sadder, but it was like, that's their, it was a practice run, and I guess Paul thought, oh yeah, we'll just, that's, we'll do it again. I'll cajole them into doing an actual live performance somewhere else down the road, and it never came together.
So I think Let It Be, the period of them working on the Let It Be album, and then the documentary and everything, it was just such like, I guess, such a depressing time. And then the way the documentary turned out, it was just like the existing Beatles, the remaining Beatles, and I'm speaking after John was killed. Yeah, like they just didn't want to deal with it. They were like, we're not gonna release this.
Neil Aspinall, who features in the film, he was Apple's CEO for a long time, and he was their road manager when they were touring. And a mate from Liverpool and everything, he said, during the anthology we cleaned up, for like the anthology, the later bits, we cleaned up some of the footage from Let It Be. Yeah. To use in there. Yeah. And I thought, let's go ahead and do the whole lot and, and redo it for the... And it was just kind of like, I brought it to Paul, George and Ringo, and Paul and George were like, nah. Yeah. We're not going through that again. We watched some of the old footage and they started going, started getting wound up about stuff. Yeah. George was like, this is when Paul started annoying me or whatever, Yeah. And it was just kind of like, it's too controversial. Yeah. And that was it. That was back in the mid-90s, so they shelved it again.
But so for decades, fans have known that all this footage is just laying there and somewhere.
It's like, I've been saying for years, it's like, when are they going to release this? Because it's like they're just sitting on this, and, then the Beatles are never getting back together. Two of them are gone.
It's like they remastered Hard Day's Night, didn't they? They made that look like really, really good, I think.
They remastered it Blu-ray, I guess. Yeah. And they did it with help, too.
Yeah, and so they re-released
Unfortunately, they had no outtakes or bloopers because that was United Artists in their infinite wisdom threw away what was on the cutting room floor, so there's no blooper reels or anything like that for either of those films.
And so then it's just like, okay, we've seen...
And then they did Magical Mystery Tour.
Yeah. Did they?
Yeah, they remastered it, and they had their... Because they bought the film for that. They produced it and directed it.
Yeah. And
so it was kind of like their kind of like baby, right, yeah.
And so fans are just like, okay, now where's Let It Be then? There's everything else. You guys have put out literally everything else. Like you've put out the songs they did at the BBC. They've compiled those and put those out. It's like they put out what are the black and white albums? What were those?
Red and Blue.
The singles.
Oh, the Past Masters.
The Past Masters.
That was kind of like, the singles compiled and everything.
Yeah, you've compiled those and put those out.
Volume 1 and Volume 2. Yeah.
There's literally like nothing left for Beatles fans to look forward to, which sounds really weird considering they broke up in 1970. It's like, why should there be anything left for anybody to look forward to? But there's just so much that existed of them. They were constantly being followed around. They were constantly being filmed and recorded and everything. So a lot, luckily for us, exists. Yeah. And we've just been waiting and waiting and waiting. And I don't know, why did they finally decide, let's go ahead and do this?
What happened is Peter Jackson, Apple invited Peter Jackson to do something separate for them. It was some sort of like museum holographic display or something that they were going to work on for the Beatles to be set in some, like an exhibition or something. Oh, yeah. And they wanted him to direct it and put it all together, and because, he's good at doing all that. And he, as he was sitting there, he thought, well, I'll just ask what where all that footage of Let It... Because, where all the footage of Let It Be
So
went.
it was actually him?
It was actually him, because he's a huge fan. And he says, well, I'll ask them. And he said... Because he was like, oh, did all that get lost? Or whatever happened, the footage? And they said, no, we've got it all.
Yeah.
So we were thinking about, doing something with it.
Yeah.
And he put his hand up and he was like, please consider me.
Me.
Yeah.
Ooh, ooh, ooh.
And by the end of the day, he was offered the job of sorting it out.
Okay.
So he went down and it's taken 4 years. I think that was back in like 2016.
Well, of course it did. It's Peter Jackson, isn't it?
And it's funny because, he had he got access to it and he was cleaning it up and everything. And he was just like the fan, he was like, oh yeah, I've got to put this in. And his favourite cut of the movie was 18 hours long.
Yeah. I've seen people online saying,
just
let's get the director's cut.
He kind of wants to do that. He goes, I don't know what's going to happen with the rest of the footage. It's probably going to go back in the vault. But, it's like, I hope one day we'll release a director's extended cut of it.
Yeah.
But this is the extended cut, because originally it was going to be 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
In the movie theater, but the pandemic completely blitzed that.
Mm-hmm.
So he had all this time, and he thought, well, I'll just put it all together and
we'll see. We'll shop it around,
and we'll put it on Disney Plus or whatever, because I think Disney Plus wanted it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's strange to me that Disney must have paid through the nose to get that on there.
Yeah.
But they were kind of like, oh, well, no, you can't do the swearing or the smoking.
Yeah.
We've got to cut that out. And they were just like, no, if you want this, you're going to have all of it,
Yeah.
And so they acquiesced, and we've got 9 hours now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because it's 3 parts. It
was even going to just be, once it went to Disney Plus, I don't know how it extended to 9 hours, because originally they were saying it'll be 6 hours,
But he decided, I'm just going to keep adding more footage. Because he would have released the 18 hours.
Yeah.
And the thing is, people are like, when it was released, all us Beatles fans was jumping for joy. It was looked so great. Everything hanging on every word.
Well, just the trailer. The trailer was so cinematic. You're just thinking like, this looks like looks like the Beatles portray, the Beatles as the Beatles, like in a Beatles film. Yeah, it looks like they're playing roles. It's just the way it was cut and everything, and it was really already telling a story just in the trailer. I was like drooling. It just looks so good.
They'd originally released a preview of it with the Get Back on it, and it showed them just like jumping around, horsing around, and most of it was at Apple, at the Apple thing, and people were like, oh, this is going to be a whitewashed version. They're going to be cutting out all the negative bits. And just showing the band having a laugh. And, there's not going to be much.
Whereas Let It Be was only negative bits. Yeah.
And I said, well, he's probably going to
Disney-fy it.
Disney-fy it, sanitize it, whatever. Yeah. Everybody was like, oh, no. And no, that is not what happened. Mm-mm. And it was just like the whole of Twickenham. It was... Every nitty-gritty bit is in there.
Yeah.
The awkward moments, the tension, George leaving, the aftermath of that, the flower pot conversation.
Yeah.
Which I was completely... When that came up, I was like, what?
Yeah. No, you freaked out on the part where George left, because you'd always heard that quote before.
I'd heard the audio of it, but I'd never seen it.
Well, you thought you just imagined it because you could never find it again.
I could never find it again. Someone had put it on like a radio show. Someone had the audio bootlegged and they were listening to it. She goes, oh yeah, because there's a lot of like,
I'm leaving the band now.
And John's like, what? And he's like, now? And he's like, oh yeah, get onto the NME and get a replacement.
Yeah.
And then you hear like Mal going, oh, well, I'll talk to George Martin about residuals and all that. And he's like, oh, no, that's why we set up Apple, so we could handle that.
Yeah.
It's like,
we shouldn't have to bother him with that. Yeah.
And it's just so good because it's just all there.
Yeah.
And it's all told with all the moving footage and everything, it's just cleaned up, restored. The first part was just like, and then they ended on that, and then he just told a great story.
Yeah.
And, this is like, and the people who like complained about, it's too long, it's
Oh, wow.
Oh, it's boring. Oh, there's lots of inane, just them jamming on the same song. Oh, my sanity. And it's like, you must be a very casual fan if you thought this, you know, if you're not happy with this, you know?
If you think it's too long. Yeah, I mean, that's literally the only explanation I can come up with. I'm just so
happy that, you know, because when I was like, when I started watching it and it was just like, you know, oh, you know, the argument took off between Paul and George and everyone, you know, in Twickenham, and you know, Paul gets up and he's all wound up and he's like, oh, you know, look, lads, the band, and and I was just thinking, you know, Paul signed off on this, and it's just like Peter Jackson thought, oh, you know, when they showed them the rough cut, you know, as he went away, as he was going. Yeah. He expected, oh, you know, they're going to send me back notes, Paul and Ringo, oh, take this out, take that out, shorten this conversation. It's just kind of natural. And they came back with no notes, and one of them, he said, you know, either it was Paul or Ringo, I don't know which was, oh, it was the most stressful experience of my life.
Gee, I wonder who that was.
Watching this was the most stressful experience of my life.
Poor thing, you know. God. Yeah, and if you've seen it, you know why.
But I have a feeling Paul, you know, he's mellowed because he's the one. He would have been the one to go, nah, you know. Yeah. He just tell us, and you know, Ringo said, oh, it's very truthful, and even in the documentary it says, you know, oh yeah, just show it all. Yeah. You know? I think
Michael Lindsay Hogg says.
Michael Lindsay Hogg says, 2,000 torchlit Arabs in the desert.
I don't know what we're going to be able to... And
Dennis O'Dell says, Sabratha.
I don't know what we're going to be able to show of this. I think he says something like that. And Ringo says, show it all. just show it all.
Mention it all. It really was, you know. And that's just, you know, it's just so good that they managed to get all that footage, put it all together, clean up the audio, clean up the image. Yeah. And it just looks great. Yeah. You know, it just tells it just tells the best story about the best band ever.
It does tell the best story, and I think it was brilliantly done. Obviously, I'd be happy to see all the footage.
All the footage. We want all the footage. You
but
know,
for me, I think for a casual...
everybody was like, we want part 4. Where's part 4 now?
Well, after you finish it, because it did tell such a story, and the way he pasted it all together, you felt like, well, there must be one of these for every single one of their albums, surely, you know. So okay, I'm ready to see the Abbey Road one now, you know. And it's just like, oh, and
you know, the tense moments, that you know, that were so, like, you know, magnified in the original Let It Be movie. You know, and people just have that memory of like, oh, it was a terrible time, and oh, they were breaking up and all that. They've been given a lot of context. Yeah. And it shows, no, they didn't hate each other. They were just kind of like kicking at the sides. George especially was like, oh, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do a live TV special, so I'm just going to walk. Yeah. And then I'll come back, and then we can, you know, because when they got into Apple... They were happier. John was more engaged with them.
Well, the thing about it is watching it, right? Like, if you have siblings, it's just like, it's just bickering amongst siblings is what it looks like. They're just bickering, really, rather than funny. 4 guys who hate each other and can't stand it. Oh, and I won't, you know, like very diva-ish, you think, you know, like,
I won't... doing this on frickin' camera.
Well, no, but you think...
And John goes like, oh, it's candid camera.
You expect it's going to be more like, oh, I can't work if he's in the room. Oh, I can't work under these conditions. Oh, and stomping off and stuff like that. And it wasn't that. It was more just bickering.
It was more just bickering. And I was just agreeing with George a lot. Yeah. And you know, it shows Paul his frustration of trying to keep the band together, but it's just not going to work, you know? Yeah. It's like, I think this is going a different direction. So yeah, we're going to do a part 2.
Yeah, it's in 3 parts. We'll get more into, like, what is in each part, I think, in the next part of this podcast. Yes. Another point, though, I want to make really quickly, and I'll probably end up saying it again in the next podcast, but I thought it was really, like you said, it gives a lot more context behind their arguments and stuff like that. Than you get in the original Let It Be. it also, to me, shows that Yoko has been so wrongly done in history.
Yeah.
Really based on the Let It Be film, in my opinion.
Yes, it's based on that.
When you see her in this footage, and I don't see how he could have just gone in and, like, just picked out the moments where she's just being totally normal, but it's just like, she's just there, you know, she's not
she's sitting there with John a lot of the time.
Nobody's mad at her.
Nobody's mad, and Paul even defends her at one point. And it's just, she's great, you know.
Yeah.
She's great. She really is, you know, but it's just like, it's going to be so funny if 50 years from now they go, oh, they broke up because Yoko sat on an amp.
Yeah, it's going to be so comical.
Which is basically what happened.
Yeah.
You know, everybody believed, oh, you know, that's what happened, you know.
Yeah. I just think that's really fascinating to watch too. The fact that, yeah, she's just there and everybody's getting along. Nobody's really that bothered by the fact that she's there.
Yeah.
You know, or they're not seeming to be anyway.
No, I think George was probably the most bothered by her.
But in the Let It Be film, there's, like, the way it's cut, it's really got, like, George, or, you know, like, giving her looks, you know? Yeah. It looks like that, oh, they show Yoko and then they'll show George and it's kind of just like, you know? And it's just, like, it very much looks like she was part of the problem when really she was a very tiny part of the problem, I think, you know? The problem was much bigger than her.
Yeah.
Anyway, we are out of time.
Part 2 is coming, so stay tuned.
Thank you guys for sticking with us through our hiatus.
Hiatus for a month, yeah.
We really appreciate you. We had a very sad month.
Yeah, it was very sad.
We're still dealing with it.
Still dealing with it, and we will continue to, but
yeah.
You know, we're back for you.
Yeah, and it's a little bit strange, just like coming back and trying to talk and, you know, be like normal.
But
like as if everything's normal, because of course it's not, but you have to just keep going, don't you? Yeah. So we appreciate you guys for all your kind words and your thoughts and everything over the last month.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody. You know, very much appreciated.
Yeah, and thanks for tuning in. We appreciate your support. And we'll talk to you next time.
Next time.
Bye.
Bye.